Hello, this is Jim Escott. I'm the Michigan Knights of Columbus State Training Director. This is the Council Officer Fresh Start training for Grand Knights. This is going to be done in two parts. This part is a PowerPoint presentation, which will probably last 45 minutes to an hour. And then I'm going to have a second video that walks you through how to do a bunch of things online. So this is the first part of it. Let me go ahead and get started. This is for Grand Knights and Deputy Grand Knights. Anyone who's getting ready to become the Grand Knight in July of 2020 should probably take this course. First of all, I want to thank you for volunteering to become a Grand Knight. It is going to be a lot of work, but it can be very, very rewarding. You are responsible to shepherd your councils, to help your men to become better men, better husbands, better fathers, better sons, and better Christians. You're going to develop a much closer relationship with your pastor as you work with him on various activities. And I think you're going to just have a lot of fun doing things for your church, helping your men, and really helping the overall mission of the church to be better. So we're going to cover three modules in this section. And then, as I said, there's a separate section. We're going to talk about how to become a successful Grand Knight. What does success look like? We're going to talk about meetings, because meetings are very important, and the youth protection policy and training. And then in a separate video, I'll give you a technology overview. So for the first module, to become a successful Grand Knight, there's a whole bunch of things that you're going to need to do and learn. But rather than overwhelm you with too many things, we're going to start with a solid foundation. What are the things you should focus on first? Then we're going to cover what sort of things should come after that. And then we're going to follow that up with telling you where to go for help and how to find resources to help you. Because after this video, you're not going to know everything. So you're going to have questions all along about where to go for help. And we've got a lot of suggestions to help you there. So, solid foundation. These are the things you should focus on first. And I guess there's like 9 items on this page. And we go through each one of these in the following pages. So I'm not going to read each of these things here, but we'll get to those here pretty quickly. First of all, one of the things is to surround yourself with great leaders. Every minute that you spend selecting your leadership team is going to save you hours of time later in the year, because those people are going to be doing a lot of the work for you and helping your council to be strong. And if you have the wrong people in positions, you're going to need to spend an awful lot of time either doing their work for them or coaching them through how to do their work, and it just becomes much more painful. So I just want to suggest you to spend a lot of time figuring out who might be good at each of the positions, asking those men to step up, and then helping them to become successful, so you don't have to do it all yourself. The next thing that you need to do is there's some forms that are important to be done. The Council Officer Form 185 is the form where you put in who your elected officers are for your council. And you'll see a copy of what this form looks like if you use member management. There's actually a second way to do this with the PDF form that's on the website, but I would suggest you do this in member management. The way to do that, and the steps are outlined here on the right side of the page. You go to the Knights of Columbus website, you sign in, and you'll get a user ID and password as your Grand Knight for your council so that you can do that. You then go into Officers Online, enter Member Management, click on the Live section, go into Council Administration. You can pretty much read through this, and it's a step-by-step process for how to do this. So please follow these instructions, and then when you get in there and you select the role, you'll pick Grand Knight, you put your own name in there, your address, actually your address and telephone numbers and email address should already be in Member Management. But if you just select your name, it'll put your name in there. Once you're done with that, you then do the Form 365, which is due a month later. This is due in July. And this is the one that tells you who your program personnel are. That's why it's called the Service Program Personnel Report. Same sort of thing, but instead of the elected officers, these are the appointed people who were appointed by the Grand Knight, your program director, community director, family director, et cetera, et cetera. And just to reiterate, there are 5 of these positions that are mandatory for each council. You need to have a program director as number 1. Number 2, you need to have a community director. Number 3 is a family director. Number 4 is a membership director. And number 5 is a retention chairman. And those are the 5 key ones that should be entered for every council. Now, you can have the same person fill multiple roles, so it doesn't necessarily have to be 5 different people, but you do need to have those 5 positions filled. And it pretty much uses the same process. In member management, here's what you got to do. The only difference between this and the previous page is you select service program personnel. Okay, next, after you've done those forms, you need to make sure that you've got a smooth transition from your predecessor. So get with the person who was Grand Knight before you, ask him for copies of all the forms that were submitted over the previous 2 years. Those are going to be very important for you to help minimize how much effort you have to put into doing forms during your 2-year period. Get your Knights of Columbus email address and password. And in the video, the second video, I'm going to show you, I walk through the process of how you do that. But basically, the easiest thing to do is talk to your predecessor, have him give you the email address, have him give you the password. Maybe sit down with him the first couple times, log in with him, and see how it works. And then eventually you can change the password to something only you know so that he can no longer have that role. Your Grand Knight jewel that you wear around your neck at your meetings does not belong to your predecessor. He should give that to you for you to use as you become the Grand Knight. Talk to him about lessons learned. If he had it to do over again, what would he have done different? What are some of the things that he learned? What are some of the things he suggests you do that would be helpful? And you don't have to do everything he recommends, but I do think if he spent 2 years in the role, he's probably learned a lot of things, and you should at least listen to that advice and weigh that in how you're going to move forward. And then the last thing here is ask him what are some of the important issues that he sees that are facing the council that need to get addressed, because addressing council issues is a very important role for the Grand Knight. The next thing you have to do here is get yourself some basic training. If you don't know how to be a Grand Knight, you're going to not be very effective. So there's some meetings that you need to go to that are critical. Grand Knights need to go to the diocesan meetings that are held at least every summer. Last year we held one in the summer and one in the winter. So I'm not sure if they're going to do 2 a year again or just 1, but look out for that. It's usually held in July as soon as the new fraternal year shows up. And then your district deputy holds meetings also at least twice a year. He'll do one in the summer and one in the winter. Typically the summer one is in July, soon after the diocesan meetings, and the next one will be like January timeframe, around mid-year. There's also a bunch of material for you to get a hold of. This Fresh Start workshop that we're going through is a great start. You will also get a leadership guide, which should be provided to you at the diocesan meetings. And it's basically a book, how-to guide, and where to find information, and a whole bunch of information that's in there. So I would suggest you look through that. One of the things I found as the training director is I get quite a few phone calls through the year from different Grand Knights and councils on issues. And 90% of the things they call me to ask me about are actually things that they could have found if they had looked at the leadership guide. It is pretty powerful. It is very informative, and I would suggest you go through and look at that to become up to speed on what you need to do, and refer to it from time to time. Again, you don't have to memorize it, but as you get questions, look through there to see if it's got answers for you, and then if not, reach out to other people for help. Method of conducting council meetings. There's a document out on the Supreme website 10318, which tells you how to conduct council meetings. We're going to go through that in step 2 later on, so I'll reserve that for later. On the Supreme website, there's all sorts of guides, manuals, videos, etc. On the state website, there's lots of guides and manuals and the copies of this training material that we're going through. And then the youth protection training is also things that every Grand Knight needs to be certified in youth protection, both for the Knights of Columbus and with his diocese. And those are all kind of key things that you should be aware of. The ones that I've asterisked here with the asterisk are things that I'm going to also hit upon in my video, the second video, because they're technology things that you can find online, and I'll show you how to get to those. Okay, the next thing, I already talked about your relationship with your pastor. You as the Grand Knight should be interfacing with your pastor on a regular basis. I would recommend at least quarterly to touch base with him. You need to become a helpful part of his team and see that you're doing that. So I would, as soon as you become a Grand Knight, set up a meeting with him to get to know him and have him get to know you. And then in that meeting, ask him, what does he want or need the Knights of Columbus to do? And how can you help in that? So it's not just telling him, here's what the Knights of Columbus are doing, and here's how we might need his help in different things and getting his approvals, but also make sure that you make right up front, what would he like the Knights of Columbus to do, and how does he need your help to establish and fulfill his mission? Next, does he have any issues with the Knights of Columbus? Sometimes their relationship with the pastor is not very good. And sometimes maybe somebody in the past did something that really irritated him. They didn't clean up the cafeteria or the gym after they used it for some purpose, and it caused all sorts of issues. Maybe, whatever the issues are, talk to him, find out what those issues are, and then act on those issues to make sure that those sorts of things that happened in the past aren't happening as you're in charge. And then as you follow up with him in regular meetings, you can say, hey, I've spent a lot of time working on this issue that you had. Have you seen things getting better? Want to make sure that you're seeing things getting better. And if I still need to focus on that, I will. And make sure he knows that you're listening to him and you're acting on the feedback that he gives you. Become the counsel that he wants you to be, not the counsel that you want it to be. So make sure that he's proud of what you're doing. He's happy with what you're doing. He sees what the Knights of Columbus doing as complimenting the parish and the parish council and the other things that your parish is doing. So I think that's a very good way to make sure that you've got a good relationship with your pastor. And then meet regularly. As I said, probably quarterly. I know he's a very busy person, so you don't want to necessarily meet with him too often. But if you don't meet with him often enough, you don't know how he stands, you don't know what his issues are, etc. So I would do that. Also, in the leadership guide that you're going to be getting at the diocesan meetings that I pointed out, there's a section in there that says how to win over your pastor. And I would read that because it gives you some good constructive ideas, and if you don't have a very good relationship with your pastor, how to start the process of healing those wounds and making that better. Okay, the next thing you need to do is plan, establish some goals with your council. So sit down with your council, at least your council leadership, your elected officers and the directors that you appointed, and go through, hey, what did we do last year? What were the results? What were the programs that we did? How did we do on membership, insurance quotas, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about the state goals that you're going to get at the diocesan meetings and the district meetings. Talk about your parish goals. What is your pastor trying to get accomplished this coming year? And what were your council goals from last year, and how did you do against those? Once you've got all those inputs, you can then sit down and plan with your officers and directors, okay, what should our goals be for the coming year? And then you're going to come up with your program plans for the coming year. What programs do you want to do? When do you want to do them? You're going to stop the ones that didn't go very well last year. You're going to add some new ones that either your council or your pastor wants you to do. Membership plans. You got 3 members last year. Probably ought to try to get at least 4 this year. However, we're going to do that differently. Set up some membership plans. Maybe you didn't do a Delta drive last year, and you should at least try to do that this year, see how that works out. What are your insurance plans? If you did not meet your insurance quota last year, how can you do that better this year? How do you work more closely with your insurance representative from Supreme? those sorts of things. And then your financial plans. How much money did you raise last year? Where did the money go? Are you going to be able to make the same kind of money this year? And where are the funds coming from, and where do you want them to go? So I think you should have all that laid out. So that's kind of an idea of what your goals should look like in those 4 areas. Then have your actions planned and tied to your goals. So goals can't be accomplished if you don't have an action plan. So have a step-by-step, have each step attainable. I would try to have a quarterly review of your goals from the previous year, and your program director should probably be in charge of providing an update on the program goals. Your membership director should have the responsibility to give you a quarterly update on how membership is going this year. Financial secretary and treasurer should talk about the financial goals, and meet with your insurance agent slash insurance representative to make sure that that those things are progressing. And if it's behind schedule, not only ask him what he can do to get that going, but ask him what he would like you to do as Grand Knight to help make sure that that takes place. Have a timeline on when you get your things done, and assign responsibility to people. Who's going to do what? When are they going to do it? The next thing is the tie between building the domestic church and faith in action. We talk more these days about faith in action, and so the term building the domestic church isn't used as much as it was 2 or 3 years ago, but it's still very much a part of it, because building the domestic church is the vision and the goal of what we're trying to achieve. It's believing that you know how to live your faith in your councils and families. It's knowing that your actions speak louder than your words, and it's the council and the family and the parish that knows everything that they must do based in prayer. So you want your families to be living their faith at home with their families, praying with their families, doing charitable works and those sorts of things. And that's really the key, to have the family be the center of what's going on. And your role as a council is to make sure that the families in your council are growing in their faith and working closer together, et cetera, et cetera. So now faith in action. Now that you've got the goal of what it is we're trying to achieve, what is faith in action? Building the domestic church is the foundational model. Our goal is to lead men in their faith. Building the domestic church is the goal, but faith in action is really the action plan. It talks about what are the things we're going to do to get to the domestic church and have that goal be achieved. It highlights our opportunities to make a meaningful difference, and it focuses in those 4 areas of faith, community, family, and life. So what do? Get yourself educated. Explore the domestic church and faith in action web pages on the Supreme website. I'll go through that in my second video. Talk to your pastor and say, hey, I know these are the things we did last year. This is what faith in action is all about in building the domestic church. Do any of these activities strike you, and which would you like us to do any more of these sorts of things? And get his input and dialogue on this going forward. And then once you and your pastor have an agreement on what sorts of things you should do, then go define activities. Work with your program director and define those activities, plan them out, and execute them, get them done. The next thing you got to do is address whatever problems your council has. Every council has different issues, and they're all different priorities. But if you ignore them or don't pay any attention to them, what tends to happen is over time they get worse. So that's where the phrase "bad news does not get better with time" comes in here. So you need to, as Grand Knights, seek out what those hot issues are from others. And I've already given you 2 examples. When you're doing your turnover with your predecessor Grand Knight, you should ask him what he thinks the issues are. When you talk to your pastor, you should ask him what he thinks the issues are with your council and what you could be doing better. Ask your council officers, ask your council. You probably have your own assessments. Prioritize those issues so that you know which are hotter issues than other issues. And then step up and try to fix the largest issues, the biggest issues first. Now, it's not solely the biggest issue. It's whatever the biggest issue is that you have some reasonable idea of how to fix it. So, but again, if you don't address them, things are just going to get worse. So it's better to address them and get them taken care of. Now, those 9 things that I just covered are the most important things to be done first, and I want you to focus on those 9 things first. The next set of things I'm going to cover are secondary. So I'm going to, as you can see on this page, getting Star Council is important, and it's a goal, and it's something that you should be concerned about. But you will fail at Star Council if you don't first tackle those 9 items that I talked about earlier on. So make sure that you cover those first. So in this section, Star Council, it's basically a way to measure whether a council is really healthy and well-rounded and in good shape, because it really shows 3 main things. If you're doing all the right programs, and your programs are faith in action, and you're building the domestic church, then you're going to have filled out the prerequisites to get the proper programs done, to get the Columbian Award, and have that part of your Star Council taken care of. The second main piece is membership growth. And again, if you've got great programs, you're doing good things for your parish, the men are very involved, building the domestic church is growing, you will be attracting new members and getting those members into your council. So your council should be growing in attendance and people coming and people joining, because they want to be part of something great that you've achieved by all these great programs that you're doing. So membership growth is the second piece of this that needs to come into it. And then the third piece, of course, is your insurance quota. And it's really not that hard to achieve. The quotas are nowhere near as much as they are for membership, but getting families to realize how to take care of their families and have the right insurance in place, so that if the father or the mother pass away, their family is protected financially and sound. It's just a great thing to make sure that that families are well taken care of. And Star Council basically shows you've got those 3 things under control, and they're all growing, and your council is healthy, and good things are happening. So that's why this is a very important goal to try to achieve. Not necessarily for the award, but it is nice to get the award, but because it shows and reflects that your council is healthy, because they are doing great programs, they are attracting new members, and those members are taking care of their families through having the appropriate insurance in place. The second thing is forms. Now we're going to go through forms in more detail a little bit later here, as well as in the technology presentation I'm going to do in a second video. But you're basically the CEO of a company. That's the Knights of Columbus Council at your parish, and just like any company, you got forms you got to fill out, income tax forms, other sorts of forms. It's your way to communicate to both Supreme and to the state what your council is doing and how well they're doing or how poor they're doing. So these things are important to get done. Then I want you to oversee the personnel in your council and mentor those people to grow into better leaders. So let's talk about Star Council. I already kind of talked about most of this on the previous page. You do have to attain your membership goal. You have to attain your insurance goal. You need to complete and submit the required forms, and you got to make all your per capita payments. And then you also have to have completed your programs to achieve the Columbian Award. And then as Grand Knight, you and your designated council officers need to take youth protection training, brand new thing. I talked a little bit about forms. Here's just some guidance here on these forms. I know it's something you basically have to do. Try to find a way to minimize the effort to get them done, but maximize the value. And a couple of suggestions to do this is to minimize how often you're changing who fills them out. If somebody has to fill out I don't care which one we're going to talk about, the 185 form. And one year the financial secretary does it, the next year the Grand Knight does it, the year after that you've got the deputy Grand Knight doing it, and the year after that you've got someone else doing it. Every time you fill that form out for the first time, it takes you 10 times longer to do it than it does to do it the second time, because it's new, you haven't done it before. Where do you get the information? How do you find the form? Et cetera, et cetera. So I would try to find a way in your council of some forms can be done by, let's say you have a membership director that is membership director for the foreseeable future, which is the next 3 to 5 years, or has been the membership director for the previous 3 to 5 years. If that person has certain forms that he does, and he just does it year after year, by the third or fourth year, he gets them done in 5 minutes. But every time you change and give it to somebody else, it makes it a lot worse. So just find a way to, as much as possible, have the same people do it this year as did it last year, and just minimize those changes. Use a copy of the previously submitted form, which you did last year as a starting point. I would discuss each of the upcoming forms at every officers meeting. Typically, as Grand Knight, you'll have 2 meetings per month, one for the officers to just kind of plan out things, and then one with the general council to have your regular general council meeting. And at your officers meeting, you should talk about, hey, in the next 6 weeks, these 3 forms are due. Who's going to do this one? This is the financial secretary. Are you on top of it? Are you going to get it done? This one's the Grand Knight. I'll get this one done. I'm on top of it. And then we've got this one here for the program director to do. Are you aware you got to get it done? Make sure you're on top of it. So it just kind of makes sure that you're planning for those sorts of things. Get them done on time or early. It minimizes frustrations. Because once they're late, then all of a sudden your district deputy has to do something that he doesn't like to do, which is to begin to nag you about them. Hey, why isn't this form done? Can't you get it in? What's the holdup? He's going to be getting some heat from the state. He's going to be giving you some heat, and it just gets very frustrating for everybody. So it's best if you can just, bite the bullet, get them done on time or get them done early. And then use the online forms whenever possible. The paper forms take a lot longer to process just because there's a lot more manual effort involved. Here's the critical forms, and I'll quickly tell you what each of these are. The 185 we already discussed earlier on. That's the report of the officers chosen. That's where you list out the officers that were elected, the Grand Knight, the Deputy Grand Knight, the Chancellor, the Recorder, the Treasurer, those sorts of things. Form 365 is a Service Program Personnel Report. That's where you list your directors that are assigned or, yes, chosen by the Grand Knight. They're not elected. Program Director, Membership Director, those sorts of things. The Fraternal Programs Report, Form 10784, should be done for each of your programs. And again, maybe you should try to have your program director handling most of this. We'll show you what that looks like later, but basically for every program you do, you list out, here's the program name, here's when we did it, here's how many people attended, here's how much money we raised, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Form SP7 is the Columbian Award application. That is kind of a summary for the entire year of all the programs that you did. So if you did the 10784 for each of your programs, you can just summarize them all up into the SP7 for the annual award. And it's much easier to fill out the SP7 if you've done the 10784 for all of your programs. 1278 is the annual survey of fraternal activity. This is one that's due every January, and it basically says things like, How many fraternal activities did you do? How much money did you raise? How many hours were spent doing charitable activities? Those sorts of things. And again, if you've done the 10784 forms throughout the year, summarizing some of that stuff up into the annual survey makes that really, really easy to get done. And that one's very important for the Knights of Columbus to maintain our charitable organizational status with the federal government. The 1295 is done twice a year, August and February. And it basically shows your financial audit, how much money to bring in, where did it go, does the checkbook balance with the financial secretary says should be online, and just make sure your financials are well taken care of and is not getting out of control. And then the 4584 is for the Special Olympics. This form needs to be filled out in two different ways. One is if your council does anything specific for Special Olympics. It's a way for you to spell out how much money you gave and how many hours you spent supporting the Special Olympics. But also if you do the annual intellectually impaired or mentally impaired drive, either once a year or twice a year, the 20% of your funds that go to the state does automatically go to Special Olympics. So you can count those hours and dollars towards Special Olympics. So if you're not even doing any Special Olympics on your own, you can still fill that form out for the 20% that gets submitted to the state. So keep that in mind. Now, even though you've got leaders in place, your role is to oversee those people, but you don't want to be over managing them. But I think it's important for them to see that you show interest in what they're doing. You're providing them some direction, but you're still letting them do your job. So let's talk about a couple of things here. If I'm a really good program director, I don't need much direction. I should be left alone to do my job. But as Grand Knight, if you're showing interest in what they're doing and then you're constantly thanking them for what they're doing and recognizing them for their good efforts, they're going to feel appreciated and then they'll continue to do a good work. If your program director, on the other hand, is more weak, maybe he just got the job, struggling with how do you do it, then again, you're only going to know that by watching how he's doing, showing some interest. And then you can provide some direction on, hey, maybe you should be doing this, and let me help you fill out this form this first time. And let me help you, along the way, and maybe do a little mentoring to bring him up to speed and getting him on his own. But showing that interest, providing direction, letting them do their job, and most importantly, thanking them whenever you can, showing them that you appreciate what they're doing is important. And these four roles, program director, membership director, financial secretary, and treasurer, and your insurance agent, are kind of some of the key roles that you need to be on top of and make sure that you're overseeing. Then your job is to develop leaders. Again, eventually someday you're going to step down as Grand Knight. Is your deputy Grand Knight ready to take on your role? And our new members coming into the council are ready to become directors and or officers. So I would follow up on this and get okay people to become good people, have good leaders to become great leaders, and those sorts of things. SME stands for subject matter expert. So if you've got a program director that's really good and knows his stuff, as a subject matter expert on programs, see what he can do to have them teach others. If you've got a really good membership director that's very good at recruiting, again, same thing. If you can get them to teach others how to become great membership directors, it's just going to be awesome. Because eventually that person's going to step down. And then what do you do if you don't have somebody else in the wings that's learning how to do that job great? Work with your weakest leaders because they need your help to become better. So coach them, mentor them, praise them when they should be praised. If all people get is negative criticism, they're going to feel bad about it. So you have to thank them for the things they're doing well, and then step in and help them with the things they're not doing so well. Each year, leaders have backups or replacements. They should each be trying to find someone who's next in line who can maybe be their second lieutenant to help them with things that are going on, or fill in when they're on vacation, and those sorts of things, who will then hopefully eventually agree to take their place one day when they decide to step down or do something different. Ask people what they want to do next. Get some sort of an idea, because if you've got a membership director that's been membership director for 6 years and he's getting sick of it or burned out and wants to potentially do something else, find out what else he wants to do. Maybe he wants to become the program director, or is interested in stepping up to become a deputy Grand Knight and Grand Knight. Ask people if they're having fun. As I said, sometimes you can get burned out, which is not good for anybody. This is supposed to be fun. And if they're having fun, great. And if they're not having fun, what can you do to help them in their roles so that it's not as agonizing and can become more fun? And then, are there people that want to move up into leadership? It's always important to be finding those people. And if you don't know, or you don't ask and you don't look for it, you'll never find that. And then eventually you get to the point where you're trying to nominate new officers and you can't find enough people to step up. But part of that is your own fault for not looking for who wants to move up and talking to those new people and grooming them. Resources. I'm not going to go through every single one of these because you can read this on your own, but this class is a great place to start. Your leadership guide, I already told you, has got lots of information in it. How to conduct council meetings, tells you how to do that. The Supreme and state websites have tons of material out there. Youth protection training. Talk to past and present council officers. You don't have to know everything. Your financial secretary is a great resource about how to do certain things. He should be an expert on member management who can coach you through that. District deputy, his main role is to be there to help you. So create a great relationship with your district deputy. Reach out to him for help. He's supposed to help you. Make sure you're getting the help you need. And then you've got state officers and directors who are always also there to assist you. More so your district deputy, because you should always be trying to go through him first. But if he doesn't know or needs any help or is not available, reach out to those state officers and directors as well, because they're there to help you. Officers Online is a great thing. We're going to go through this in more detail in the technology video we're going to do. And then you go to the www.kfc.org and click on Officers Online. Lots of information there. And it's available to Grand Knights and district deputies, and also to financial secretaries. The Officer's Desk Reference is a great place to, it's a great guide that tells you how to interpret the Constitution and laws of the order. The Officer's Desk Reference, which is out there in Officers Online, it tells you all these different things you might need to know that you can take a look at. And again, there's just lots of material out there for you. Moving on to the second thing, we're going to talk now about running successful meetings. And I'm going to kind of start out with an overview on this of a lot of Grand Knights complain that they have, let's say, 100 members in their council, but they only seem to get 10 to 15 to come to the meeting. And that's kind of disappointing. And I think, there's many reasons for that. You can't solve that all at one place, but I think one thing that is the Grand Knight's responsibility and in your control in your purview to control is your meetings. And let me just give you an example of somebody who joins the Knights. Is kind of excited, comes in and goes to his first couple of meetings, and they drag on too long, or people get into an argument about something. There's no agenda. It just seems haphazard. We get off on tangents. Most of what's being talked about is no of interest to this guy. And he's like, oh my God, why am I coming to this thing? And they very soon get the position of, I'm not going to attend meetings because they're painful. They waste my time. I'm really not learning anything. So why am I going to these things? So it's your job as the Grand Knight to make sure that your meetings are effective. People have a way to learn some things. That's not a waste of your members' time. It's a good place for people to come together to bond, to have a little bit of fun, and all that. So if you're not prepared for your council meetings, they're bad, and then it's the effect of that is you get a lot less people coming to your meetings. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. It is the Grand Knight's role and responsibility to run the meetings. Before the meetings, you have to prepare. During the meetings, you have to execute it, effectively. And then after the meetings, you got to follow up. So what are the roles or responsibilities? You've got to facilitate the meetings without dominating them. You got to make sure that they're fun and enjoyable so that people want to come back. You want to make sure you're communicating valuable information so people come and say, wow, I learned a lot at this meeting. It was a good use of my time. That they're interesting and not boring, and that they're moving. You don't let them, get bogged down or get off track. So you want people leaving your meetings saying, wow, that was a great meeting. And whatever you have to do to make that happen, you have to do. So before the meeting, how do you prepare? I already talked about several times this, how to conduct a meeting. It's out on the Supreme website, dated October of 2015. We're going to show you a little bit later what all's in that booklet, but it just tells you how to conduct meetings formally, but yet you also have to have a certain amount of informally in there to keep them fun and relaxed. So work on that. Have yourself an agenda. Review the previous minutes and notes. What are the topics you're going to cover that are carried over from last time? What are the new topics you want to bring up this time? Dan Ramika from the state of Michigan sends out something in emails to every Grand Knight and every district deputy every month, something called talking points. And if you read through his talking points, it gives you lots of suggestions on things you should be covering at your council meetings. You don't have to cover them all because it's a generic set from the state, but if you don't know what to talk about, this is a great place to read through this and all of a sudden think, oh, I should cover this item and this item and this item and add those to your agenda. Communicate the agenda. Either email it out ahead of time or have paper copies available at your meeting so that you can identify the important topics, discussions, and what needs to be voted on. During the meeting, start your meetings on time. Again, people get really irritated. Some people, when the meeting's supposed to start at 7 and it's 7:15 and you still haven't started yet, because the later it starts, people are thinking that just means the later I'm going to get out of here at the end of the day. Follow your agenda. Park new items for future discussions so you don't get off track. Make a list of your action items and make sure that you're following up. The best way to get other people to follow up on their action items is to set a good example. So it's really important for you to know what you agreed to do, follow up on those things, and at the next meeting say, last time I had these 3 action items, I followed up on them and here's the results. Assign responsibilities and tasks. So anything that comes up as an action item that's not yours, make sure someone else gets assigned to do it. Confirm what their next steps are. I already talked about not getting bogged down, and then use Robert's rules and how to conduct business pamphlets, and we'll talk about those coming up here. After the meeting, you publish those meeting minutes so everybody knows what was talked about and what's being done. And then follow up on your action items. Already kind of hit up on that and talk about what the next steps are. Effective meeting tools. On the Michigan State website, there's a how to conduct a meeting pamphlet, which is a good thing to read, and many other resources to reference. Supreme website's got a bunch of things out there, and Robert's Rules of Order, which you can either buy a copy or whatever. It basically just talks about how to run a meeting and how to do sorts of things. And here's what's in the booklet, The Method of Conducting Council Meetings. It basically talks about how to set up the meeting room, the council chamber. what are the duties and responsibilities of each of the people that are there at the meeting, conducting the officer and the council meetings, ways to do that, parliamentary procedures about motions, when should you need to vote, and who needs to vote, and how to take suggestions for votes and allow a certain amount of dialogue, and basically talks about how that stuff's supposed to work. And while you don't have to follow everything to the T, I think if you at least understand this and incorporate into what you're doing, again, you want a certain amount of discipline so that you're not running things haphazard, but at the same time, you're not so rigid that it's not, the meetings aren't fun and whatever. So find the proper balance there. Important tips: have your advocate help control the meetings. As Grand Night, you know, especially if you're brand new, you really kind of need to win over win over your council to have them like you and like your role. And if you get into a meeting and people aren't paying attention, or they're getting off topic, and you have to be the bad guy to say, hey, we're getting off topic, let's kind of get back to here, and you start needing to you know, be a little more forceful. Maybe ask your council advocate to fill that role, to have him pay attention, and maybe then he can raise his hand and say, excuse me, Grand Night, I really think the council's getting off track. We're supposed to be talking about this. I suggest we get back to that and let this thing go on. And then you're not always the bad guy, and he can kind of help you in that role. Don't try to revisit things unless there's new information, new data, or circumstances change, because otherwise you'll just be rehashing the same thing over and over again, and it just gets people frustrated. Look, the last topic here is youth protection. This has become so much more important in the last 3 to 4 years, although it should have been important all along, but we're going to talk about this and your role as a Grand Night. So first of all, here's what Carl Anderson says. You know, our job is to safeguard our children. That should be pretty self-explanatory. Why is it important? I mean, every time we talk about the charitable work of the Knights of Columbus, we talk about helping those who can't help themselves, helping the widows and orphans, protecting the unborn, and whatever. And you know, part of that is our role is to make sure that our children are safe and secure and protected, and they're not abused. And it's just so much a part of our order that it just is supposed to go without saying. So helping to ensure that our children, the children of our parishes, children in our communities are safe and secure, and we're looking out for them and making sure nothing bad happens. And so that just kind of goes without saying. Who needs to be trained? In each council, there's 4 positions that need to be trained: the Grand Night, Program Director, Community Director, and Family Director. Now, while it's best to have 4 different people trained, so you've got 4 people in your council that know this, the absolute minimum is to have 2 people. So you could potentially have one person be the Grand Night and the Program Director, and a second person be the Community Director and the Family Director. So you need to, your council needs to at least have 2 people who've been certified, but it would be best if you had 4. All these 4 positions are required to take the 3 classes. The classes are called Meet Sam, Duty to Report as a Mandated Reporter, and the Knights of Columbus Safe Environment Policies. Those are the 3 classes that you take online. And then the Community Director and Family Director are also required to have a background check done. It's not really a big thing. It's basically the same background check done for most companies when you hire into a company. It just checks to make sure, checks your criminal record, checks a few other things, and so it's like that. It's a requirement to get Star Council. You can't get Star Council if those 4 positions aren't named and those 4 people haven't completed their requirements for protection. So this is very important. How do you sign up for training? Well, first of all, the council needs to submit its service program personnel report, which is the report that says, here's who my program director is, here's who my community director is, here's who my family director is. Once that information is sent in, Supreme then notifies Presidium, who's the company that we use to provide the training. And then Presidium sends emails to those members telling them how to take their training. Now remember, and it's important because a lot of things go wrong here, when you fill out your service program personnel report, if you handwrite it and your handwriting sloppy, they may not be able to read these email addresses very well. And so when Presidium tries sending out to these emails to people and they get it wrong because your handwriting was sloppy, they'll never get the notifications. So just follow up on that to make sure it's being done right. So here's the service program personnel report. I showed you this one on the left here, which is what's done in member management. This is what the PDF form looks like if you go to the Supreme website and pull it up. This is manually filled out and sent in. The preferred option is to use member management, which is this form here on the left, because it makes human error a lot less chance of happening. And once you submit it, it goes through right away and takes 4 to 6 weeks less time to get done. So it goes through the process pretty quickly. That's all I want to cover here. So once that happens, your directors are going to get an email that looks like this, and it's going to say it's from Armatus Support. It's got the date on it and whoever the member is. It's going to say, thanks for contacting us. To log in, you click on this website, you enter your username and password, and the username is listed here as what I've got listed as TBD, but it'll have your username in there and your password underneath it. And then it'll say, click on the orange login button and go from there. So you're going to get this. The other thing I want you to note is here at the bottom, it always will have, here's who sent you the email and what their phone number is. So if you have issues and you're having trouble using this, look at your email, read that 1-800 number, call Latoya Arps if that's the person on your email, and ask her for help. Say, I tried to do this and things are going wrong. So they're there to help you. Make sure you utilize that. So once you click on this URL, you're going to get this screen that comes up. And you put in your username here, pretty straightforward. You get it out of this email. You put in your password here, pretty straightforward. You get it out of the email. And then you click this little yellow login button. And poof, you're done. You're there. Now, when you get to the website, it's going to look like what's over here on the left side of the screen. It's got this message from Carl Anderson. And then it's got the first of 3 classes, the second of 3 classes, and the third of 3 classes. And also, if you look here, and it's a little hard to read on my screen, but it will tell you the status, whether it's completed or not completed. And if it's completed, what date it was completed on. So you'll know if you're done. If you log in here and this says completed and this says completed, whoops, I gotta go backwards here. Previous. So if they all say completed, then you're done. And so those are the 3 classes. The background check is not on this page. You will get a separate email if you need to take the background check. And then Grant Knights will also see at the bottom this thing called Armatus Administration. And if you click on that, oh, excuse me, I'll get to that here in a second. Let me go backwards here for another second. Previous. Up here at the top, right above Carl Anderson's head, there's a little orange bar that says certificate. And if you click on that, it will pull this thing up, and you will know you're done if it lists all 3 classes and has the dates on when you completed that class. If yours does not show all 3, then you're not done. So that's one way to check it. One of the things I've seen over the past few years is people come to this site, they see the first class, they take the first class, and at the end of the class it says you're done. And they think that means you're done overall, but what it really means is you've done with that class. So again, if they look at their training certificate, it will only have the 1 class on it, won't have the other 3, meaning, duh, you're not done. So take all of that. Now, if you're Grand Knight and you click on Armatus Administration, like I told you, you can come down here to this orange thing here. It says View Organization Current Course Status. And if you click on that, it brings up a report that looks like this. It tells you for this council, this person's name, duty to report class. He completed it on February 19th. And he is the Grand Knight for that council. Here's his phone number. There's his email address. And notice that Stephen took duty to report, Knights of Columbus Safe Environment, and the Meet Sam classes. And those all stay completed. So he's done. He's done his 3 things. And then this next person here, what classes he took. And it may go on multiple pages, but you can see and look through this to see any that say incomplete or not done or whatever, because that will show you places where people are not complete and tell you what your organizational status is. So great tool to be used. That is it. I think I've pretty much covered everything. And so good luck. And don't forget to take a look at the next video, which is on technology and a lot of the things on getting online, because that will be very important for you as well and show you some things that will be helpful. So thanks, everybody.